So I just started reading a new book called Finish. I forget the author's name at the moment, but I just started, so I'm only a chapter into it. But the first chapter is a lot about why people quit and quitting in general, right? Whatever it is, if you have a goal, if you have something you're working towards, you've a new diet, a new exercise plan, a career, start a business, write a book, whatever it is, why people quit, and the nature of that. And it started making me think because I find that to be an interesting topic because there's a psychology to it. There's the mental aspect of it and what leads to us quitting. And what particularly struck a chord with me in the chapter was there was like an undertone of like almost in simple terms, like an enjoyment people get from quitting. I guess a relief is probably a better word, which probably makes more sense. But I would put them very close together. There's a pleasure almost in quitting. And some of that's intuitive, right? If you set a goal, if you're trying to do something that's difficult, if you're going out for a run and it's hard and you're not in shape, quitting is a relief. It feels good. There's pleasure. The pain stops, right? The discomfort stops. So there's naturally a pleasure and a motivation, and again, somewhat intuitive. Your mind looks for reasons to quit because it's trying to protect you, and it sees whatever the activity is that you're doing, it sees some danger in that. It might be physical, it might be mental, psychological, it might be to your identity, but it looks for reasons for you to quit. And that whole concept of taking pleasure in quitting is something that, when I think back for myself, resonates with me more than I probably want to admit. I feel that. I felt that historically, like quitting, being defeated by something. In a weird way, there's like a liberation in it, a feeling of, again, relief, and you're glad that happened. And even though you were defeated, even though it's a negative thing, it ends up being a positive feeling that comes out of it. And it's I say probably something that I wouldn't typically care to admit because it's not something to be proud of, right? From a society perspective, the norms of society say quitting is bad, it's weak. So, most reasonable people, or I guess I should just speak for myself, I'm not proud to say that I've quit stuff and that it's brought me some pleasure, but it's probably the truth. And much like we always talk about, when something like that starts, when you have a dynamic like that, you have to dig into it and you have to face it. Because if somewhere in the back of your mind you are motivated to quit, there is benefit in quitting. You could try and hide that. You can try and make pretend it's not there. You can try and muscle through it. But my typical approach is you face it. You logically face it and you work your way through it. And if at the end, and you accept whatever answer comes out of it. If at the end of it, you're a quitter and you just don't have the mental strength to follow through on things that are really hard, you're better off knowing that. Now, maybe you can take some steps to change that and fix it if you want to, or maybe you just accept that's who you are and you're not meant to accomplish, great things or hard things and that type of stuff. And you can imagine the fear in coming to a realization like that. For many people, you would never even want to go down that path. It's easier to keep that buried away, not really acknowledge it. When you do quit, even though you feel the pleasure, you don't really, face it. You don't really admit to it. And typically you do the things we do, right? You make excuses as to why you quit. I could have finished, but this, or I'll do it next time, or I got some bad luck, or whatever it is, right? And all those things. So, from my perspective, I don't want to be a quitter. A lot of it gets to a topic we talked about recently, which is regret minimization. If I think about fast forwarding to, God willing, being 80 years old, if I look back and say I quit, like I was a quitter on things, anything that was hard or seemingly worthwhile that I went after, I quit on it. and I took pleasure in it, right? Because at that point, let's assume I'm being honest with myself, I would regret that. I know I would regret that. So there's something you have to reconcile there. If I believe those two things are true, somebody's lying, as I like to say, right? In my mind. So what's the lie? What's the lie? Is it true that I would actually regret it, or do I just say I should regret it, right? That's the feeling I know I should have, so I would say that. Or am I not really a quitter, right? Am I not really that person that can't finish things? You have to face it. You have to face that. And I think as I've started to think through that and understand which of those is it, and really trying to open the door to the quitting and understand what's at play there. Some of it's, as I said, it's intuitive, it's simple. Things that you quit typically are things that are hard. These videos, this thing I'm doing with trying to think better. I've started doing social media posts, talk a lot about trying to think about what is a model to do this more effectively and actually make a difference in the world and have a purpose. There's lots of unknowns. Whatever it is it ends up being, if it's a book, if it's a podcast, if it's a course, whatever it is, some sort of community, there's lots of unknowns, and it's going to take a lot of work to do it. And there's a decent chance, even with all that it fails, that it never really turns into anything. The more you commit to it for yourself, as well as other people that know you're committing to it, there's a bit of embarrassment, shame if it doesn't work, if you can't make it, which you hope you can make it. So for all those reasons, again, it's hard, and it makes sense that quitting would seem like an option. Try and cut your losses and get out of it. So it makes me think, like, what's the answer to that, right? If the quitting isn't unnatural, right? If the inclination to quit, and that's kind of where I'm getting towards, I don't think that I'm inherently a quitter. I think that I just haven't approached it the right way. I haven't accounted for it. I haven't thought through it properly, right? I wanted to think it was binary. You're either a quitter or you're not. Like, either I'll just figure it out, I'll do it magically, or I'm gonna quit. Versus taking some agency and some control over it and saying, like, hey, maybe there's a scenario where I quit, but if I approach it the right way, if I strategize the right way, if I think through it the right way and plan for it the right way, maybe I can take some ownership and control over that and stop myself from quitting. And that's kind of more where I'm leaning now, is that that's the case. And it brings me back, I mentioned it in this, and I mention it often in videos, of that mental toughness that comes in again. And I think it's a mindset, and it's a mental toughness that you have to really defeat that quitting, to overcome that aspect of it. There's lots of tips out there in this book. I'm sure we'll have a lot of them, and I'm sure they'll be useful, and I'm sure they're true, of ways to trick your mind into not quitting. Make small goals, do a little bit each day. Put a board up and make an X every day you do the thing you're supposed to do. Make sure you do 10 minutes every, whatever it is. There's all different things that I think are intended to trick your mind to stop you from quitting. But my hypothesis is that those are tools and they're helpful, but at the core, you have to face it the old-fashioned way. You have to face it with mental toughness and say, listen, this is gonna be fucking hard. This is gonna be painful. I can't trick myself out of that. I can't convince myself that this is gonna be easy. Face it, own it, accept it, that this is gonna be hard, but I'm gonna do it. And the way I'm gonna do it is through mental toughness and persistence. And I will not let myself give up. And I've talked about, in the mental toughness topic, David Goggins a bunch. I've read his book, I've listened to a bunch of his stuff. And again, I don't agree with everything in his approach, but I do think the core of it, the key of it, the key aspect that's driven his success is that mental toughness. And it's not magic, it's logical, but it's simple. It's when you face something hard, you just have to condition your mind, callous your mind is the way he says it, to understand that you're not going to quit. Like, you will just keep showing up. You will keep doing it. In his case, it was, running hundreds of miles and his body shutting down and him still pushing through, which is an extreme case of showing your mind you're not going to quit. But I think you can apply that same framework in a lesser way on something like this, right? On days where it's tough, on days where you're feeling like this is pointless and I don't know where it's going, when it seems like the work is too much or family life gets in the way or whatever the thing is where that tug starts coming of like, you should quit, this isn't going anywhere, or you're going to embarrass yourself, or it's probably going to fail anyway, whatever the thing is, you just keep showing up. You just keep doing it. And if you think of it through that lens, paired with the regret minimization, if you can convince yourself up front that I will not regret this if I keep showing up, it will not be something I regret. And that takes work up front, right? To really come to that true realization of that I won't regret this, because you have to understand that you're on the right path and you believe in your objective, and you're not lying to yourself and you're doing it for the right reasons. But if you do that and you come to that acknowledgement that I will not regret this, it enables, I think, that mental toughness that much more, because the fear of failing, the fear of, the embarrassment or whatever it is, not being good enough, it kind of goes away, because that fear is based on the premise, I think, that you're going to regret that you did it, and you're going to feel like I should have done something different and this was so stupid of me. But if you know you're not going to regret it, then the outcome almost doesn't matter. And the idea of continuously showing up becomes that much easier. And again, I think that's the key to it, is to just keep showing up. Again, not novel, not insightful, simple in concept, extremely hard in execution when it's hard, right? When it's something difficult. And again, I come back to, I think that's why you have to directly face it. You can't trick yourself in. You can trick yourself into it to an extent, and maybe you can use some of those tips and tricks to help you face it. But at the end of the day, you kind of have to look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm just going to keep doing this. I'm just going to keep showing up, and I'm going to keep getting after it and try and make this into something and see where it goes. And I think, that simple concept, just doing that and forcing yourself, right? Forcing yourself to do it, no matter how hard it seems, is really all there is to it. I mentioned running in the beginning of this video. If you start running and your body tells you, your mind tells you stop, right? Because you're out of shape or whatever. It's a similar concept. The more you keep running, the more you keep fighting through that, eventually you get in shape and your mind starts to believe it and your body comes along with it. I think it's a similar concept here. So for me personally, what I'm trying to apply now, what I'm trying to embody in how I approach this is think of it through that mental toughness. Accept how hard it's going to be. Accept that. Know that. And know that when it is hard, when it feels the worst, where it's like, this is not going anywhere and I shouldn't today should be the day I stop doing it, or I should just not, I should skip today, whatever it is. That's almost, you take that as that, if you think of it in terms of the instruments we talk about, you take that as that positive sign that like, hey, this is good, because we knew this was going to happen. I knew these days were going to come. And if I could overcome it today, well, I'm that much closer to my goal now. So look at it through that positive light with that mental toughness. And I think you're on to something then.